Namaste everyone. A very warm welcome to today's guest talk titled Making Powerful Points with PowerPoint. The speaker today is Dr. Ramesh Bijlani. We all know him very well. I'll share a formal introduction for him. Dr. Ramesh Bijlani is a prolific writer, an inspirational speaker, and a spiritual seeker residing at Sri Aurobindo Ashram, Delhi branch. A professor at AIIMS-New Delhi till 2005, Dr. Bijlani has been teaching for more than 50 years and has been admired for the simplicity and clarity of his talks and presentations. Welcome, sir. We look forward to a very helpful and fruitful session with you. Over to you. So please unmute yourself.
Thank you, Arunima, and namaste, all my brothers and sisters. Arunima just said that I have been teaching for 50 years. So I have 50 years experience, but whether it is really 50 years experience or 1 year's experience repeated 50 times will be for you to judge by the end of the talk. Over these 50 years, as a teacher, I have used various types of visual aids, starting with the blackboard and then the green board and white chalks and colored chalks and then the whiteboard and the overhead projector. And of course, all along with all these, for a very long time, we also had 2x2 slides made from photographic film. And they looked so much more elegant than the other visual aids, but they required so much planning in advance. And therefore, now that we have PowerPoint available and it's so easy to make these slides and the possibilities of using various fonts and color combinations and what have you is virtually limitless, that one gets very excited and therefore one can achieve a lot, in fact, as a effective aid using these slides. But then the fact remains that whether it is these PowerPoint slides or whether it is the blackboard, these are all aids. And these aids are not meant to be a substitute for knowing the subject well. That type of a risk did not really apply to things like the blackboard and the whiteboard, but in fact, that is a real risk with these PowerPoint slides, because it's possible to have virtually all the material on the slides and the teacher can virtually read it out. But that is not what the slides are meant for. And there are many other points also which one can keep in mind to make these aids more effective. And that is what we shall try to see, because these days making these slides has become so common. Even school children are expected to make these slides. And I'm glad that at least one teacher is there and maybe another one has joined. One teacher from Plateau Public Senior Secondary School is there. I wish there were more teachers from schools and colleges and also students, because even school students are now making PowerPoint presentations. And I feel that the quality of the presentation or the slides does not necessarily depend upon the experience that the person has. It depends more on how the person is actually using or misusing or abusing the facility of making these slides so easily. So with that little introduction, let's now turn to the slides. In fact, before I do that, I may also say that, in fact, the title is somewhat sort of tantalizing, but in fact, to make powerful points, PowerPoint is not really essential. In fact, the most effective speeches perhaps have been made without PowerPoint. And since we were recently celebrating the anniversary of Sri Aurobindo's Uttarpada speech, which is so famous and it's itself become an occasion which is celebrated year after year as an event, that did not, Sri Aurobindo didn't use any PowerPoint. So some of the most effective speeches, and even today, when it comes to motivational talks, etc., perhaps a speaker does a much better job without these PowerPoint slides, because then it's the direct link between the speaker and the audience. There's good eye contact, and the speaker grabs all the attention. All what he says is what gets all the attention and not what is there on the screen. And but when it comes to passing on or transmitting some factual information, then these slides do have a place. And if they're properly used, they can multiply manyfold the efficacy with which that knowledge is transmitted, the facts are transmitted. So with that little introduction, let's now turn to the slides. Now, why PowerPoint? One may ask, if it is possible to make powerful points without PowerPoint, why use it at all? We can use it as an aid, but they're not a substitute for knowing the subject. And whom do they help as an aid? They help both the teacher and the students. They help the teacher as an outline. One can carry the outline on a piece of paper, and there's nothing wrong with it, nothing to feel ashamed about it, because an outline helps the teacher stay focused and also serves as an aid to memory. After all, the teacher is not expected to memorize the subject, he has to know the subject. And therefore, if a few points are there which remind the teacher about something that he must say, and also the a sequence in which he should say different things, that outline, there's nothing wrong with carrying it on a piece of paper. But then if it is in the form of slides, it becomes more respectable, so to say. So it serves as an outline, and the teacher stays focused, there's less digression, and it does help the teacher. It also helps the students because there are two types of learners, those who are predominantly visual learners and those who are predominantly auditory learners. So, visual aids help those who are more inclined towards visual learning. Apart from that, I have seen that it also helps students who are a little handicapped in the language in which the talk is being given, in which the teacher is teaching. So the language handicap to some extent gets overcome by the slides. Suppose, I mean, as happens most of the time, this uh, teacher is teaching in the English language and the slides are in the English language. The student's knowledge of English is not very good. But then if even if he does not understand fully what the teacher is saying, if along with that the important points are there on the slide, it becomes easier for the student to be able to connect. And this applies not only to Indian students, but also when we get, say, groups here in the ashram, groups coming from countries such as Spain or Brazil or Argentina or Germany. Now these are countries where English is not spoken too well. And they know a little English. Along with that, there's this PowerPoint in English. The two, when they put the two together, they're able to get much more than they would only from a talk. There are some reasons which are not really good reasons for using PowerPoint, and that is it sort of the teacher can show as if he's not looking at the notes. Looking at the slides is no better, but it makes it more respectable. Also, if a person has slides on a subject, he looks like an expert. If he doesn't have slides, then looks maybe giving the talk for the first time. But if he has slides, it shows generally he has been probably doing it for a long time and he already has a good set of slides and can carry those slides anywhere he goes. So it looks more like an expert if he has slides. And just as you know, he looks more like an expert if he has written a book on the subject. So little less than that maybe, but does give an look of being an expert, even if the person has a good set of slides on this subject. But there are better reasons for using PowerPoint to help visual learners, as we saw, also to save time, because speaking and along with that showing the slides on the whole takes less time than just showing the slides. Then to show pictures, graphs, and charts. This probably is the most important benefit of using the PowerPoint because uh, one can talk words, but a picture is sometimes, as I say, worth 1,000 words. So to be able to show a picture or to be able to convert data into a graph or a chart makes a visual impression which just straight away goes to the head. So straight away, it drives home the point more effectively than mere words. And of course, if one is very good at the technology, one can incorporate in the PowerPoint also videos and sound or audios. So then it truly becomes an audio-visual aid. not just a visual aid. Now just have a look at the slides that follow. Now here is a slide, and what it says is there are three kinds of people. The happiest are the innocent who think everyone and everything basically good. They are the children who will never grow up. The second and biggest kind are half-baked optimists, people with a mental conjuring trick which lets them look at hunger or mutilation without discomfort. They think the wretched deserve to suffer, or that their nation is curing, not causing their miseries, or that God, nature, history will make everything right one day. The third and the rarest sort are the cynics. They know that human life is an essentially painful disease which only death can cure. They have the strength to live consciously among those who live blindly. Now, the first impression of anybody would be that this is a horrible slide. And how is it horrible? Firstly, uh, the font. This is not the best font to use in slides. We'll see which are the better fonts. Not only the type of font that has been used, but also the size is too small. Then there are spelling mistakes. For example, rarest is spelled wrongly. And the text from some book has been just copied here, which is not what a slide is supposed to be about. And then here, after the full stop, starts a new sentence with a small t. It should be a capital T. So at least some of the objective sort of reasons why this slide is horrible, but one need not go into that. The very feel one gets one looking at a slide like this is it's a horrible slide. Now look at the next one. There are three kinds of people. The happiest are the innocent who think everyone and everything basically good. The second and biggest kind are half-baked optimists. They think the wretched deserve to suffer, or that their nation is curing, not causing their miseries, or that God, nature, history will make everything right one day. The third and rarest sort are the cynics. They know that human life is an essentially painful disease which only death can cure. Now this is a little better. Why? Because the font size is a little bigger. The font is better for slides. This type of font is better. And the teacher has made some effort to summarize the knowledge, given the essential points, still saying the same thing, but in fewer words, so that in the same space, he has been able to use a bigger and better font. And there are no spelling mistakes. All those things have been taken care of. So this is a better slide. Now look at the next one. Now here there's a title, Kinds of People. And then it says there are three kinds of people after a little space. The happiest are the innocent, innocent in italics, who think everyone and everything basically good. The second and biggest kind are half-baked optimists. They think the wretched deserve to suffer, or that their nation is curing, not causing their miseries, or that God, nature, history will make everything right one day. The third and rarest sort are the cynics. They know that human life is an essentially painful disease which only death can cure. Now, the student can get much more from this slide, which has received a little more attention from the teacher to make the presentation more presentable, more appealing, and uh, visually easier on the eye, and arranged in such a way that one can get the different points more easily. Now let's see the next one. The title says people, three kinds. Number one, innocent. Everyone basically good, everything basically good. Hmm? Number two, half-baked optimists, the majority, rationalize misery, hope against hope. Number three, cynics, the rarest, life a disease, death the cure. Now, these are the slides which a teacher can use as an outline. They can serve as an aid to the student, but then the teacher develops these points on his own because he has mastery over the subject. He doesn't have to do it in the words in which the book says it. He can make it more conversational in style. He can put in his own bit. He can give examples, stories, etc., to illustrate all this. But then he has these points on the screen as pegs to hang on, whatever he wants to say. So that is the proper slide. Now, making this type of slides, which are really what slides are about, needs reflection on the subject, apart from mastery of the subject. It takes time to make these slides. Reflection takes time, and it takes more time to make this type of slides. It needs a certain skill and takes hard work. No pain, no gain. So if you want good slides like this, one will have to spend more time and work harder. Now, suppose now we'll take a certain category of slides which are trying to enumerate certain points. Now, how can that be done? Can be done in many ways, and we'll see a few ways of doing it. For example, 3 pillars of sadhana. Hmm. Sadhana, particularly in integral yoga. That is the personal effort for making progress on the path of integral yoga. Aspiration, that's a keen, intense desire to make spiritual progress. Rejection of everything that is an obstacle on the path, and surrender to the divine will, surrendering one's personal will to the divine will. 3 pillars of sadhana. Now, this is one way in which this slide can be made. This looks a little better, aesthetically more pleasing. How about this one? Still better because the material is so little, the space between the lines has increased. That makes it look better. Now, yet another way, you just have aspiration there. The teacher talks about aspiration. Then comes the next one, rejection. Now the teacher talks about rejection. And then in the next slide comes also surrender. Now the teacher talks about surrender. So all the 3 points are there together, but one by one. So the student is not distracted while the teacher is talking about aspiration. The student is not distracted and starts thinking, what is rejection? What is surrender? Because in the first slide, it is only aspiration. Only after aspiration has been discussed comes rejection, and after that comes surrender. Can we improve upon this? Yes, we can improve even upon this. We'll take another example here. 3 modes of nature. Tamas, the principle of ignorance and inertia. Then Rajas, the principle of kinetic activity. Now, here you see that not only now the second point, that Rajas has appeared, Tamas, which has been already discussed, has been put in a font which is not so easily visible. It has become less prominent. So the attention at once goes to Rajas, and the student is not thinking too much of what has already been discussed, but at the same time, it is there. And then comes Sattva. When Sattva comes, Tamas and Rajas both become fainter. Okay? Now this is, but is there another way? Yes, there is also another way, and for that we'll take another example. Now, 3 prerequisites for peace. For mental peace, there are 3 prerequisites. The first is faith. Now, faith is in a little darker color. Most of the time I was using blue. This is in purple color, much darker than the blue. Then comes the next, sincerity. Now, faith has turned blue, the font which was being used in most of the slides. Now, this is in a font which attracts more attention because it's in a different color. And then comes the third point, surrender. Faith, sincerity, and surrender. They came one by one, and the point which was being discussed was in a brighter color. So instead of making the points which have already been discussed faint, we have made the point which is being discussed more prominent and brighter and darker. So that's another way of doing it. So there's not one way of doing it. Depends quite a bit on the personal preference of the teacher. But there are so many ways of doing it. Now let's see another example. Again, enumeration. 3 essentials of Sri Aurobindo's philosophy. Life affirmation. Now here we have put a picture of Sri Aurobindo also. Now that makes it more attractive. Very little material to be shown. Why not put a picture? And then comes the next point, evolution. Now here, evolution has become more prominent because it has been highlighted with yellow color in the background. So that is the technique that has been used for making it more prominent, that has gone from life affirmation. And now futuristic vision. That is the third essential point in Sri Aurobindo's philosophy. And now futuristic vision is the one which is most prominent. So you see that when you have to enumerate points, there are ways and ways of doing it. And one has to apply one's mind, which will be the best in a particular context. And of course, partly depends on the personal preference of the teacher, how he wants to take up those points one by one. Now, suppose there are 3 points and he wants to discuss quite a bit about those points, not just orally, but there are a few additional slides which he wants to use for that discussing that point. Then how it can be done? Let's see what will be an effective way of doing it. For that, we'll take another example, Sri Aurobindo's 3 principles of teaching. So this slide shows clearly that now we are moving to the 3 principles of teaching, a big picture of Sri Aurobindo. And we can do it differently. We can start it like this. Now, you see the same thing, but now this has a different type of a look. And yet, this has yet another different type of a look. The same thing, but then it shows that we are starting on a new topic. we are giving a new movement to the discussion. We are now going to talk about Sri Aurobindo's three principles of teaching, three different ways of introducing the thing. Now let's see how these three principles come one by one. We will state the principle and then we have a few slides to discuss each. I'm not going to discuss these principles of teaching, and I'm not used all the slides which I would normally use to discuss these principles because the talk is on PowerPoint. I'm just trying to make a point to show how these things can be handled in a PowerPoint presentation. So now here, the first principle of true teaching is that nothing can be taught. Now, this is the stating the principle. Now we go to the usual pattern of slides, which the teacher is using most of the time. And then he starts discussing that the true principle is nothing can be taught. So he has taken the keywords from this. And then under that, he has some discussion about that. And he may have 1, 2, 3, or 4 slides discussing the first principle of teaching. And then to wake up the students and tell them that now we are going to the second principle, the character of the slide has changed. It is the same as with which we started the first one. So this becomes sort of this jerks the student out of his slumber if he had gone into one, that now we are going to the second principle. So change in the character of slide is deliberate. But then we again go back to the usual pattern. We'll come to why the pattern should be maintained for most of the slides, the same pattern, because then it becomes easier for the student to grasp it. He's not looking so much at the colors in the slide and the designs in the slides. He's actually looking at the material in the slide. He has got accustomed to a certain pattern. He can grasp it more easily. Now, the second principle is that the mind has to be consulted in its own growth. Whose mind? The student's mind. And then few slides discussing the second principle, and at the end can come a quotation from Sri Aurobindo about the second principle, which is relevant to the second principle. For example, here the quotation given is, the chief aim of education should be to help the growing soul draw out that in itself which is best and make it perfect for a noble use. So not only bring out the best within, but then how to use it, that should also the student should pick up from the process of the teaching learning process going on in the school. So this sort of sums up the second principle. Before the teacher goes to the third principle, and again now that pattern is being repeated, the third principle is being introduced in a similar pattern as the first two. The third principle of education is to work from the near to the far, from that which is to that which shall be. And then a few slides to discuss it. For example, this is one of those slides discussing it. An educationist, Nilje, whose picture is here, and then what she says about this principle is, in the primary section, the immediate surroundings are always the first pages of each new chapter. Very relevant to from near to far. Now, we go to how to prepare the text for a slide. Now, we are moving from enumeration to the text. Where we introduced enumeration, we had this type of a background. So we are using the same type of background. But here I'm trying to show one more thing, that we are going from enumeration to the text. This text can be written in so many ways. The color of the font has not changed in all these. The highlighting is in yellow, but still there is a difference. The difference is in the spacing between the letters, and this facility is available in PowerPoint. You can have the letters normally arranged. This is what's called normal, or loose, or very loose, or tight and very tight. So now what you will use depends upon the situation. And here, probably the best would be loose or very loose. That would look much better than the other three. So that's what we have done here. So we are moving from enumeration to the text. I had kept additional spacing, a loose format, also in enumeration, if you remember. Now we go to the next thing, how it can be done. Suppose we want to use the text only as a subheading. We're talking about slides, and we are talking about the text of the slides. Now the subheading is important. Everybody knows the talk is about slides, so that is not very important. But at the same time, the heading has to be in a bigger font than the subheading. Now, how to make the heading prominent in spite of a smaller font? This is how it can be done. Bigger font, smaller font. But then how to make this more prominent, the subheading? The subheading is in all caps. Still better, subheading is in all caps and the space is wider. Now you can make out the main topic may be slides, but anyway, we know it, we are talking about slides. But now we are moving to how to uh, prepare the text of the slides. Now let's see a few points about the text. Of course, we have seen that the text should not be something which has been copied straight away from a book. We'll see a few more details now. Of course, teacher should reflect on the subject, reduce the key ideas to bullet points, all that we have seen. Now, a few more important points about the text. Basically, each slide should have just one idea. And we have seen how that can be ensured even if the ideas are interrelated. You can introduce enumerate three things or talk about three principles of teaching. They're interrelated, yet trying to stick to this principle as far as possible. One idea per slide, or one idea should grab the attention of the student, even if the other two are there. Then, only the essence should be given, not the details. If the teacher has thorough mastery over the subject, he should be able to speak without having everything on the slide. The language is sketchy. No full sentences, bulleted points, grammar and punctuation rules are entirely different. There's no full stop after sketchy language. Huh? Sketchy language is not a sentence, but yet it conveys what one wants to say. So the rules of grammar, the rules of punctuation, they all change when we are coming to these slides. Sketchy language is not only acceptable, it is desirable. A few more points about the text. This material on each slide should be limited. As a rule of the thumb, there should not be more than 7 lines, and there should not be more than 7 words per line. And if you're showing a table, it should have less than 4 columns. If one tries to put too much in one slide, and especially if it's a table, this is what happens. You get what is called the railway timetable effect. Of course, these days, we don't have those railway timetables. Everything is on the internet. But then those of you remember, we did have railway timetables once upon a time, and they had these crowded pages from where you had to find out which train will depart from where and when and so on. Uh, and if you show a slide like this, what is it that the audience is saying? Wish I had binoculars. Yeah. Now, formatting of the text. You might see the heading itself also, the text, the space is wider, formatting, the space is less. So that's deliberate again, and personal choice, but then I think it does have a certain psychological effect, which is desirable, which is what the teacher wants to convey when he's saying that the text is the main thing. We're talking about how to format the slide. Now, you'll see the same material being presented in different ways, and you can see what difference it makes. Now, the material that we have for this slide is that in a good slide, there should be enough space between lines, and do not use all caps, all capital letters. This is an important point because I've seen many teachers try to type everything in capitals. They think that it is more prominent and therefore it look better. But in fact, we are more accustomed to read something which is in the lowercase, that is small letters, than reading something which is in all caps. So one should not use all caps in a slide. And will this material leave enough space between lines and do not use all caps? We'll see how all it can be done. Now here it is in all caps. On the whole, still this looks better. This is easier to read than this. Leave enough space between lines, do not use all caps. Can we improve upon even this? Yes, we can improve upon it. Now, it's all caps, but there are bullets, and there is more space between the lines. The space between these two, which are a continuation of the same point, is less than the space between these two. One can increase it still further if one wants, but at least the spacing is creating a certain separation between two different points, which is psychologically important for the student to be able to grasp what is being said. And now here, no caps, enough space between lines, and there are no capitals. Doesn't this look much better than any of the previous versions that you saw? It makes all the difference. Then check for errors. And here's a little humorous little poem. We depend sometimes too much on the automation, the spelling checker, whether it's PowerPoint or whether it is whether it's Microsoft Word, if you make a spelling, the word gets underlined with a red wavy line. And we feel that that's enough. The spelling has been checked. If that wavy line appears, we'll find out the correct spelling. Uh, for that, also the provision is there in the computer, and everything will be okay. But that is not always okay. And this is a little humorous little poem on that. I have a spelling checker. It came with my PC, personal computer. So the old poem, talking of those days when people worked mostly on personal computers, not on desks, not on laptops and smartphones. It came with my PC, and it was called a spell check. Spell check was a separate software as compared to just the typing program. I have a spelling checker. It came with my PC. It highlights for my review mistakes I cannot see. Now, this C will not be picked up by the spell check, even today. I ran this poem through it. I'm sure you are pleased to know. You are pleased to know. huh? It's letter perfect in its way. hmm? This it should be here and this it should be here. The two it's are wrong. Uh, they should be interchanged. It's letter perfect in its way. WAY. It should be way. My checker told me so. So this is what the spell checking can do. So it means you have to use your head still. I don't know whether artificial intelligence is better than this. Hmm. These days we are talking in terms of artificial intelligence, but at least the old-fashioned spell check and even today the Microsoft spell checker will not be able to pick up this type of mistakes. Then a few more points about the text. Try to develop a certain pattern in the slides. Similar background, same color, same type of font, so that after the first few slides, the student is able to grasp the whole thing much better. So develop a certain pattern in the slides. And the pattern includes both the background that you have and the fonts that you use. Now let's talk about the background. Now, so this has been used as a separator between different chapters. The way you have chapter separators, a blank page in the books. So again, in that, there is a uniformity. But then this tells the student, now we are moving to something else. So we'll have 2 points to discuss in the pattern, background and font. First, we are talking about the background. Background should be simple. And by keeping it simple, we achieve what is technically called a low noise signal ratio. Because the signal is the material that you want to transmit, and noise is the unwanted attention that is grabbed by the background. So if the background is very colorful, it has beautiful designs, it has flowers and butterflies and birds and fish and all types of things in the background, then that is all noise. The student will be trying to appreciate the aesthetic beauty of the background rather than study what is written in the slide. So keep the background simple. That it keeps the noise signal ratio low. It means less of noise, as little as possible, more of the signal, and that further noise goes down if the same type of background is repeated from slide to slide, except when one wants to make a deviation, one wants to deviate from that with a purpose. So there's a reason behind why you deviate. And when you do deviate, or even otherwise, if you want to have a background which is not as simple as this one, then there are many other types of background which are possible, and I'll show you a few samples a little later. So background should be simple, uniform, but then you can vary it when necessary as a separator, like separation between chapters, or as a wake-up device to make the student suddenly alert to something new is starting, something important is coming. So as a wake-up device. So for that, one can use a different background. And now we'll see an examples of a few backgrounds. Now, this is one type of background. And on that, how do we write? Three different ways. All visible. The important thing is, most important, it should be legible. All three are legible, but then uh, partly it will depend upon your personal preference, but partly it also depends upon how prominent you want to make it, whether you want to whisper, whether you want to speak in the normal tone, whether you want to shout. Uh, so this is sort of whispering, normal tone, and shouting in terms of, and it has a purpose. So it should be thought about how you will do it. But important thing is, no matter how you select to do it, the color scheme and the way you present it should leave the material legible. Now, another background and a few different ways of putting it. yet another background, yet another background, yet another background. And how has all these backgrounds been created? By taking pictures of the sky. And this one was taken on an early morning when there were dewdrops on leaves. So it's just a leaf with some dewdrops on it. Now, these are all pictures which are natural. They give beautiful art, better than any artist perhaps would. And there's no copyright. You can click these pictures, use them as the background. There's no copyright. Nature gives us everything free. And what is this? This is the bark of a tree. So whichever color you like, you can use. And there are so many ways of writing legibly, irrespective of what type of color you have in the background. Now here you see, yellow will show quite clearly on this, but if you want to be very sure that yellow or white should show clearly, here what I've done is I've done highlighting also in brown. So it doesn't stand out very, it doesn't have a stark contrast with the background, and yet it becomes more prominent than this. And same thing I had done with the leaf here. Now, this is more easy to read than this, but the highlighting is in green. So it sort of gels well with the green leaf. And the same thing has been done here. Now we come to the font. Broadly speaking, two types of fonts. One is the serif and the second is the non-serif types. Serif, is these little strokes. For example, if you see this S, uh, the thickness is not uniform. And moreover, there's a little stroke here and a little stroke here. Or say if you see the R, there's a little stroke, horizontal stroke at the base. If you see the F, again, there's a little horizontal stroke at the base. Or you see this T, there's a horizontal stroke at the base. This is thin, but then there are these little strokes at the two ends of these two horizontal, at the two ends of this horizontal line. Now, those which have these little uh, things at the ends and so on are called serif fonts. And they are very good for written material, for books. These are the ones which are usually used. They're easy on the eye. And the science behind these strokes is that when you uh, look at something written, you don't look at each letter completely. Your eye is able to interpret the entire letter from just these strokes. That is what catches your eye, and that is interpreted as the letter. In fact, you don't even look at each letter separately, you look at the word as a whole. Sometimes you don't even look at a word as a whole, you look at a bunch of words as a whole. And that is what makes reading also faster and reading more easy. So that's why this type of fonts are easy on the eye, and but they are good only for books. They are good for running material, it is called, but they're not very good for slides. But however, I've given you a few examples of serif fonts. This highlighted yellow is Cambria, but then you have Times New Roman, Bookman Old Style, Garamond, and Palatino Linotype, and then these are bold and these are not bold. So in the same font, you can have bold and not bold. In general, one should avoid serif fonts in slides. But if one has to use for variation somewhere, probably Bookman Old Style is the best. As you can see, especially when it is bold, very easy to read. But the preferred fonts in slides are the non-serif fonts. And here are a few examples. This is what's called Seago semi-bold. Now, Seago semi-bold, why I have put on the top and highlighted like this is because it's a relatively new font. Uh, and one of the criteria sometimes used is that we should not use a font which is overused, which has been used so much that people have got too used to it. If there's some new fancy font available, you might use it. And you also find that the Seago font has variations. It has semi-bold, it has light, and so on, and bold. So it has variations. So you don't have to make it bold, you can use it. And semi-bold seems very good for all practical purposes, very easy on the eye, easy to read, and it's one of the good fonts. But then there are many other non-serif fonts like Arial. And if you have less space, you can have a similar font which is narrow, Arial narrow. Calibri, Calibri has now got a little overused, used for ordinary typing also. And then Tehoma and the Verdana. And all these are size 36 fonts. And as you can see, size 36 doesn't mean that all these will give you the same size. Verdana gives you the biggest size and Calibri the smallest size, although the size is 36. Another important difference between all these fonts is the difference between one, a small L, and a capital I. You can see that most clearly, say in Vadana or in Tehuma. One small L and a capital I. In some of the fonts, these top three fonts, you cannot distinguish between a small L and a capital I. So if you want that all this distinction is important, then and you don't want to go to a serif font in which all these distinctions are more clear cut. If you don't want to go to a serif font, then use either Tehoma or Vardhana. Okay. If that distinction is important for you. But these non-serif fonts are the favored ones for slides, just as they are the favored ones for any signboard, notice board, and so on. Because a slide is that type of material, it's not running text. So in general, non-serif fonts are better than serif fonts, and avoid using more than two types of fonts in the same presentation. And avoid overused fonts. And then the font and the font size can reflect a mood. Apart from legibility, the type of font you use and the font size can reflect a mood. A loving mood, an angry mood, shouting, whispering, all that can come out also partly from the font size. So it's not that just because space is available, you'll fill and you have only one word to write, you'll fill the screen with that word. Then it look like shouting. Now here is an idea of the font size. See, if you're using Arial in bold, then from 44 to 20. It's very difficult to say which is the right font. So it depends upon the screen on which you're seeing it. Uh, Earlier, when it was only either only computer, then as a rule of the thumb, it was said not less than 28, and under no circumstances whatsoever less than 20. But maybe on smartphones, 20 may become too small and you may need a bigger font. So generally, we try, I mean, at least I try to vary somewhere between 44 and 28. This is the range I follow in most of my slides. A picture is always better than text. This looks much better than just to write smile. Huh? So in general, pictures are better than text. And if you are not able to find the right picture in your own collection, then you can get copyright-free pictures, a very large variety of them, and very easy to search with a search engine which comes on these websites on pexels.com and unsplash.com. We have a very wide variety of royalty-free, copyright-free pictures. Of course, they all have some sponsored pictures also, which may not be freely available, but a very large number are copyright free. And all what is expected is that if you want to donate something to the artist, you can do that. Or at least if you want to mention the name of the artist, they appreciate it, right? Acknowledge the source and the name of the artist. That's all what is expected. So pexels.com and unsplash.com, two good sources of copyright-free, royalty-free pictures. Now, how many slides one should have in a presentation? As a rule of the thumb, less than one per minute. So for a 1 hour presentation, less than 60 slides. I had 1 hour, but I have 80 slides today. But then that is because the character of the slides, many of the slides are hardly taking any time. And I have given into the temptation, which is not always very good for a teacher, to try and tell everything that I felt was important, not leaving anything out. Then, no matter how good a presentation you have made, there are always slips between the cup and the lip. And to avoid those, rehearse, email your presentation to yourself and also to the organizers of the event, so that if you are not able to carry it on a pen drive, you forget the pen drive, you lose the pen drive, still it is likely to be available if you have emailed it to yourself as well as the organizers. Carry it on 2 pen drives, in hand baggage, not in checked-in baggage. Carry your laptop with you if possible, especially if you have worked on a Mac, because many places what they'll have will be compatible with Windows, but not with Macs. And preview the slides at the place where you have to actually speak, so that you know where you will stand, where the slide will show, how big the slide will look. whether you'll use a pointer, what is the remote control there, whether you have to control the lights and so on and so forth. And when it comes to lights, a good slide should not require a dark room. You should be able to see slides in a brightly lit room. That is one of the cardinal principles, because then you can maintain eye contact with the audience. And finally, no matter how hard you have tried, still something can go wrong. So for that, two things are important. You should know the subject well so that you can do even without the slides. And of course, don't forget to pray when you start and when you end. To start, that everything go well. At the end, that everything went as a sign of gratitude, that everything went well. But then there's a little more subtle aspect also to the prayer. You want the presentation to go well. Why do you want it to go well? To create a good impression. Young people sometimes think that if they make a good presentation, then somebody in the audience will be impressed and maybe give them a job. Especially if there's a foreign audience, maybe he'll invite them to go straight away to the UK or the US, huh? If they are able to. But that is not the purpose. The purpose behind making a good presentation is that here is a set of people who have come to listen to you. They have placed their trust in you. They trust that they will get something useful from you. They should be able to get a useful message from you. That is what is important. So you are an instrument. You have an opportunity to give. And when we have an opportunity to give something to those who need it, we fulfill the purpose of our life. So it is an expression of your love. Give what you have to those who need it. So when you are speaking, you have something to give. That is why you are speaking. And you have an audience who seems to need it. And this complementary situation you have to be grateful for. And that is the reward, not impressing somebody in the audience who may then offer a job or a promotion. I stay and work at Sri Aurobindo Ashram Delhi branch. That's where I'm speaking from. And you're all welcome here. Gratitude to the Mother and Sri Aurobindo for making these events possible. And thank you all for being there.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for a comprehensive presentation on how to prepare a good presentation. We got some really helpful and effective tips from your vast experience as a speaker and teacher yourself. Thank you. Participants, if anyone has a question, please go ahead. You can put the question in the chat box or you can unmute yourself. Durjoyji, please go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Bijlani, for a lovely and very useful presentation, especially for teachers like us. Just want to mention two things, and the first one you already mentioned, and that is in an effort to get the message across. Sometimes a common mistake is a high noise to signal ratio. Too many prominent things on the same slide. And because I'm in pathology, I've seen some pathologists, they will use multiple photographs on a single slide. And when it's much better to have a single big picture. So yeah, that's a very important thing. But for me, the most important message was what you gave last. And that is, I think, the key to a good presentation. When you're there in the spirit of giving and you realize the responsibility, then all the other concepts and concerns, they fall in place as you prepare the presentation. So that last message, I think, was a very, very crucial one. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Participants, anyone has a question, please go ahead.
Thank you, Durjay. Seeing you after a very long time. Are you at Bahrain or back to India?
No, actually, I'm further away. I'm in Antigua, in the Caribbean islands. Yes, I'm with the American, University of Antigua College of Medicine. Just thought I'll have a little adventure and came out here. But maybe we will see if you are there in Delhi in July. I would like to see you in person.
Be nice
Thank
to
you.
meet you.
Yes, thank you.
So I think you covered almost every point, every aspect regarding. So I think we have a question, yeah, from Marcelo. I'll read it out. Dr. Ramesh, thanks for today's session, very profound and useful. You have mentioned several times that normally people can be fully attentive for 20 minutes approximately. What would you suggest to do at that point?
Yes, that's what I said in the previous talk also, which was about how to give a good lecture. The attention span is 20 minutes, but then the compulsions of life usually make the lectures 1 hour long. Now, it has been seen that while the what is retained the most is what is spoken in the first 20 minutes, there are a few things which are retained also from what is spoken after that. So there are those peaks, and those peaks are not random. Most of the people tend to remember the same things out of what was spoken after the first 20 minutes. And what are those things? Those are the points at which the teacher asked a question, or a student asked a question, or the teacher cracked a joke. Now, those are the points at which once again, the attention goes to what is going on, and those are the points which are better retained. So what a good teacher does is to try and multiply these, which means he tries to make it a little more interactive. He tries to put in a sense of humor, and the result is that he increases these peaks. So if the peaks increase, even after the first 20 minutes, the peaks keep coming more frequently, then quite a bit will be retained. And if what is not retained, if there are peaks are so many, the rest can be filled up the way you fill in the gaps. Or say, if you have a dotted line, you can still make out the whole line. So that's what happens if these uh, interactive moments and humorous moments, they are multiplied.
Yes, Durja sir, please go ahead.
Also, in continuation, with this same question, where I am, I've joined here just a few months back in this medical school. And I was used to, a format where a lecture would be 30 minutes to maximum 1 hour, not more than that. But here, and I believe this is this is common practice in the US, and our school follows a very US based format. We sometimes have lectures, believe it or not, for 2 to 3 hours. And then the teacher really has to think of how to provide those breaks, because we do understand that the attention span cannot be that long. So the teacher creates those breaks. Interactive lectures help a lot. So we also have access to software which prepares quizzes. So in between, just to be sure that your audience has retained something, you give them a quick question, and you also have access to resources like polling, so that the audience can see the results of how they have responded. So there are softwares that manage all of these, and these interactions then not only help to break the monotony and capture attention, but also to ensure that what the message that you have given already, how much of it has been retained. It is an opportunity to examine that. So there are different devices that you can use to make these lectures more interactive. But having said that, I have seen wherever it is, students, if it is not compulsory for them to attend a lecture and the lecture is recorded, they would prefer, I mean, many of them would not be there. So the teacher then also has to remember that the lecture is being recorded for use later on. And you cannot be, of course, very over conscious of that. Otherwise, it will affect your presentation. But at the same time, you have to see that you are as precise as possible, so that the video turns out okay. So, these are some of the additional things that one has to keep in mind sometimes in different environments. Thank you.
Well, just a little short response to your comments. Let me start with the last one, recording. We are recording this session also, and it will be on YouTube uh, after a few hours. So if you want to recommend it to any of your students or colleagues, please feel free to uh, tell them that they'll find it on the YouTube channel, the Yes Spirituality YouTube channel. And very easy to find. A video has just been uploaded. Just go to the videos and this will be the one which will be right at the top, the first one. The last one is the first one.
Yes,
So
I'll forward.
very easy to find. The other few things which occurred to me were that when the sessions are very long, as you said in the US, they have one more thing, that they don't want actually too much of a structured one-way communication. They prefer the type of sessions which is structured, but at the same time they are guided quite a bit by the questions that the students ask. I've faced that type of queries or sort of comments in the ashram sometimes, because we get groups from the US, and when I talk to them, they feel that it was um, not guided entirely by their questions. But then the other comment which I get also is that if the sessions that we have in the ashram had been guided entirely by their questions, probably they would have not been able to ask the right questions, because the type of topics we discuss are not the type of topics that they normally think about. So what I do is to have them on sort of on the same page. Before I start, I tell them that I know that in your country you're more accustomed to this session being guided entirely by your questions. But here, since we'll be talking about topics which are so alien to your normal way of thinking, that you may not be able to ask the right questions. So I will speak, but at the same time, to have interaction, please feel free to interrupt me at any point. So that sort of becomes the compromise. And then another point which you made was very useful, that is questions. Questions, not only impromptu questions which arise from the discussion, but pre-organized questions, because many things can be sort of recapitulated through the question. Some subtle points can be brought out through those questions, and a discussion can take place around a question which you have framed. Not only the students' questions can help organize the discussion, but the teacher framed, because good thought-provoking questions, especially of the multiple choice questions, not the single response types, but the assertion reason type of questions. Now, those are the type of questions which can lead to a very good discussion. And you might have seen, if you have seen some of the videos which we had in the YES courses, particularly YES.01 and O2, we have plenty of questions which were of that type, and a part of the class was completed through those questions. So many things which were not brought out on the class came out while discussing those questions. Another thing which I think can engage the students in a very long session is some practical experiential exercises. That is something which they all do. They all do it on their own. They're busy with that for some time and then exchange notes. So it leads to an experience. It's an experiential exercise. So these are some of the things which can make a long session also okay. And of course, one can always have a short break, uh, call it a tea break or a biological break or whatever type of break, but some sort of a break also, a 5-10 minutes break also one can have.
Thank you, sir. So, as sir mentioned, we will upload this session on our YouTube channel. I have put the link of our channel on in the chat box just now. You can please save this link. Anyone has a question, please go ahead. Guys, we go to this. So I think you covered every single point regarding presentation, a good presentation. Thank you so much again. I thank the participants for being with us today. We can close today's session with a moment of peaceful silence. Let's